Hello, podcast fam. I am thrilled to share some exciting news. My book, So Grow Lead, is officially live on Amazon. This book is more than just my story of starting a nonprofit and building a peanut butter factory in Malawi. So trust me, the ups and downs of that journey are worth the read. It's also packed with practical strategies to help nonprofit leaders like you tackle challenges with clarity, courage, and a whole lot of heart. If you've ever wondered how to turn your vision into reality, navigate the inevitable hurdles, and build something meaningful, whether in your organization or in your own life, this book is for you. I'd be so grateful for your support in spreading the word. Grab your copy of So Grow Lead in the show notes and on Amazon today. Let's keep sowing seeds of impact together. Welcome to the Lead with Heart podcast, which is dedicated to nonprofit leaders who are passionate about making a difference. I'm your host, Haley Cooper, and I'm thrilled to have you join us on a journey of growth, inspiration, and transformation. At Lead with Heart, we believe that leading with heart means embracing empathy, compassion, and authenticity in every aspect of our work. It's about putting people first, fostering genuine connections, and creating a positive impact that goes beyond numbers and metrics. In the nonprofit world, it can often feel like we're carrying the weight of the world on our shoulders. The challenges are immense, and the road can be lonely. But here, you're not alone. This podcast is a community where we support each other, share our stories, and learn together. Each episode will dive into personal and professional development topics tailored specifically for nonprofit leaders. From innovative fundraising strategies and effective team management to self-care practices and leadership insights, we're here to provide you with practical strategies that you can apply to your life and work. My goal is to empower you, elevate your leadership, and engage your heart in all that you do. I want to help you navigate the unique challenges of the nonprofit sector with confidence and resilience, so you can continue to create meaningful change in the world. So whether you're driving to a meeting, taking a break, or winding down for the day, tune in and join us on this journey. Together we'll discover what it truly means to lead with heart. Thank you for being here. Let's dive in. Welcome back to the Lead with Heart podcast. This is your host, Haley Cooper, and I'm thrilled to welcome Bree, an accomplished fundraiser, nonprofit leader, and AFP certified trainer. She currently serves as a senior director of philanthropy at Digital Health Strategies, a healthcare-focused digital marketing and fundraising agency. Her career spans consulting for multi-million and even billion-dollar campaigns in higher education, independent schools, and arts and culture. Beyond her professional achievements, Bree has also taught nonprofit management at the University of Montana, where she earned her MPA. And she holds a certificate in inclusive philanthropy. I'm going to have to know more about that. What I admire most about Bree is her ability to pair technical fundraising expertise with the deep commitment to equity, inclusion, and supporting people, especially mothers in the workplace. Well, welcome to the podcast, Bree. I can't wait to dive into this conversation with you.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Haley.
So I always love to start, let's get to know you a little bit more. Tell us a little bit more about your background, how you got into niching down in healthcare and fundraising.
Yeah. Well, I think probably every single fundraiser you've ever talked to, I did not necessarily graduate from college going, this is the career for me. I am formerly an educator, and I would describe myself as a lifelong educator and lover of education. So I taught for a little bit right after school and found the opportunity to work for a nonprofit focused on literacy programs. And that kind of married my background as an English teacher and a reading specialist with my desire to give back and work with volunteers, and worked really closely with our foundation and learned that my relationship building skills really translated well into fundraising. And as somebody who loves education, I said, how do I learn how to do this better? And pursued further qualifications, including my CFRE, and just continued to say yes to each new opportunity. And so when I worked in consulting, I had the opportunity to work across, as you mentioned, higher education, arts and culture nonprofits and some academic medicine. And digital health strategies found me. And I feel like healthcare is really important, especially right now. And philanthropy and healthcare is really important. So digital health strategies really opened the door for me to continue to advance data-informed fundraising to make sure that donor experiences are the most impactful that they can be.
Yeah, I love that. And like I said in your intro, I want to learn more about the certificate in inclusive philanthropy. Can you tell me a little bit more about what that is?
Yeah. So I don't know if you are familiar with Maya McGill, but if you aren't, I highly recommend that you get to know her and her work. I met her through my work at Marks and Lundy, and she was at the time at FIU and had founded, I think, the very first Office of Inclusive Philanthropy on a campus and spearheaded and pioneered this workshop series and said all of the things that aligned with my passions and my goals to be really thoughtful about the way that we do our work as fundraisers, that we think about equity and inclusion and justice. And I think we're such an interesting, now you're going to get me on a soapbox. Right?
Go, girl, go.
I think we're like such an interesting place with philanthropy in the US, right? Wealth disparity creates these challenges, but there are people across income brackets that want to give back and want to make sure that people are taken care of. And so I think our job as fundraisers is to think about how our biases and our experiences are informing the way that we interact, not only with funders and philanthropists, but the communities that we serve. Question, what are the things that we're doing on a day-to-day basis, and how can it be perhaps enacting harm in ways that we don't intend? And what I really appreciated about this certificate, it challenged me to think about, as a data-informed fundraiser, right? What in the way that I was collecting and storing data could be influenced by biases and unintentional marginalization? What about like the words that I was using, the way that I was representing impact? So I think more than anything, it just challenged me to think more about the work that I do on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and I think that's so important when it comes to fundraising, because we're remiss to only think of a white male as like wealthy, right? But there are so many different ethnicities and cultures that are generous in their own right. And we're remiss to think, oh, well, only this subsect of the population has wealth, and not really view it as inclusive, and then tailor our communications to be able to reach a broader audience.
And the way that different communities give, the way that they want to be connected to philanthropy. Maya and one of her other colleagues recently did a webinar about AI and equity. And I went back to our team at Digital Health Strategies and came away from that webinar and I said, oh no, is our model biased? Because if you think about what is the data that we're feeding our models, right? AI is the hot thing right now. And predictive modeling, the data that we're feeding our models has some historic challenges to it, right? As you just mentioned, like wealthy white folks who are donors historically, right? That's feeding your model. So then is your model going to turn around and say, oh, these are the same people that look the same way, that donate in this way? And it's going to continue to perpetuate that cycle of how we identify and interact with donors.
Yeah, I know AI is a whole different conversation. Right. And I had Mina Das on the podcast, and she talks a lot about biases and using AI, and also like in surveying, like how survey our community or survey our donors, and how even if you are utilizing AI or technology, you can influence it with your own personal biases. And so 100%. It's just really interesting and a moment to just pause and see like how we are collecting that data. And you say you're in a data-informed fundraiser. I've never actually heard someone describe themselves as that. So could you tell me more about like your approach to fundraising and how you utilize data to inform your decisions.
That's interesting. You haven't heard somebody say that, because I feel like, well, and maybe this is just having been in multiple consulting roles where when institutions come to us, they say, we have all of this information. I think particularly in healthcare, right? You have HIPAA allows you a certain number of fields about care encounters and patients. And so you have that information. You have donor history information. In healthcare especially, you have folks who will share their stories of gratitude, their experiences with their care systems. And that is data, right? When people raise their hand and tell you what they care about, the way that they interact with your digital communications, where they're spending their time on your website, right? All of that is data. And we use it in so many other ways, especially in marketing. When I say data informed, what are my donors already telling me before I pick up the phone and call them, so that I make sure that when I reach out to them, what I talk to them about is relevant, that they care about it, that it's timely to what they care about. And I think that's really, at the end of the day, being donor-centered. They're already telling us information. And how do you use that to direct your work? And then from a nonprofit management standpoint of how are you being efficient and effective with your work, with your employees? How can you make sure that they're not spinning their wheels? I think about that too. How many of us have had lists of prospects and you're like, I don't even know where to start. So how do we prioritize those lists? How do we communicate with our donors effectively and efficiently?
Yeah, I think that's so important. And having that data is important because, man, have I been handed Excel spreadsheets and
Right.
No one knows history on any of the donors. And it leads to some awkward calls that can turn into generative calls when asked the right questions. But having that data and tracking it in a proper way just allows, with the constant turnover in nonprofits, allows that person to be able to pick it up and build that relationship. And like you said, whether it's donor-centered or human-centered, right? Like, you show me you care by not just picking up the phone, but by picking up the phone and remembering something about me. Like our old dentist, every time you walk in, they took notes. And they would be like, hey, Haley, I know it was your kid's birthday. How did it go? And it was 6 months ago, but still just thinking they took notes and intentionally asked me about my life or whatever I felt like sharing when they were in my mouth made me show that they cared. And it meant a lot. And it gives you that warm, good feeling, right? And you're more willing to open up or share because that person took the time to review their notes or the last conversation.
Absolutely. And I fully believe and am passionate about there's so much we can learn from data. And at the end of the day, it needs to be a human that takes it over the finish line.
Yeah, I agree.
So I could get on a soapbox about that too, but
I'm all about soapbox. That's why I have a podcast.
That's right.
Well, I would love to kind of shift this conversation to your career and motherhood. So I remember meeting you 2 years ago. Someone had introduced us on LinkedIn, I think. We were both new moms at the time. And man, is navigating that transition from deep into motherhood into the career is not for the faint of heart. And you've held a lot of leadership roles in demanding fundraising environments. How has a mother shaped your perspective on leadership and your approach to work?
I feel like becoming a mom fundamentally transformed my brain. I am still deeply ambitious in my career, and I am realizing how difficult it is to strike a really critical balance, right? I want to model for my daughter that you can continue to be in leadership roles. You can continue to drive important conversations. And I find it really incumbent upon me in leadership positions to advocate for that for folks that I work with. The work can never end, right? I think as in fundraising and nonprofit, we know there used to feel like there were cycles of work and you could say, okay, I know I'm going to have to lean in here and then I'll have some relief down the line. I feel like now it feels constant. There's constant pressure to always be on, always be engaged, always have your side hustle. And so I think finding a way to say, I've done enough for today. And then I need to step away and focus on my family and be present. And it's hard. It's really hard. Every day it is an adjustment. And I think that's where community is so important. I've really tried to actively. And so that's, I think, probably one of the reasons that we got connected on LinkedIn initially was, yes, here's another mom who is doing her thing, and let us support each other. Let us share challenges and opportunities and strengths and lean in for each other.
And I think that it is, especially in fundraising, right? Like, I remember when I was pregnant with my firstborn second child, I was going out on maternity leave at year end. Like, he was born September 24th. And we were going through our budget, and the board was like, I don't think we're going to raise this much money because Haley's going out. And like, when I found out I was pregnant, like, I set out the plan, and I was like, this is who you need to hire. This is what you need to do. This is how we're going to meet that goal. And in that meeting, I pulled my CEO aside and I was like, that's not fair. Like, you cannot just rely on the development director to raise this money. If the board is saying that we can't raise it, it's on them, not on me. And I think you just feel this pressure to show up and deliver and be on all the time, because whether that's the mission going awry if you're not there, or a donor not wanting to give because you're not at their beck and call. And so I think finding that balance is hard, and advocating for yourself in the workplace. So if someone is in that position where they're like, whether they're like getting ready to take maternity leave, or they're returning back, like, how do you start to have those conversations with your employers?
I so appreciate what you just said about you took the initiative to make the plan. And even at Digital Health Strategies, we recently just had somebody go on maternity leave, and she did some of that early work, right? Was mapping out what she knew her work would be while she was out, and worked really closely with our VP to determine like what the resourcing needs were to support with while she is out. And they made an investment. And I think there's some other folks that work in this space as well, of what are some like the fractional support that you can hire in the meantime to support people going out on maternity leave, to support folks going on paternity leave. Like, we had somebody else on our team who went on paternity leave. And I think that's so important too, right? Having moms and dads have the time to be at home with new children, to have those experiences, I think it is important. And so having those open lines of communication, being as forward-looking as possible, but not only that, planning for the reentry. I found when I came back, and this is maybe what radicalized me, right? When I came back from maternity leave, and especially in consulting work where you can be very project-based, I think there was like an expectation to just be able to pick it right back up. And regardless of whether you're in Canada and you have 12, 18 months off, or your whatever your limited leave is, 6, 12, 3 months, whatever it is in the US, like having a plan for you to come back, be gentle with yourself, because as I said, my brain was fundamentally transformed, right? You're adjusting to different sleep patterns. And frankly, even today with a 2-year-old, I'm adjusting to different sleep patterns. And so having grace for yourself, you're going to come back different. Having grace for each other and figuring out where you can support and learning how to ask for help. I'm still not real good at that.
Me neither.
Yeah.
I try to figure it out all on my own, and then I get overwhelmed. And my husband's like, all you got to do is ask. I'm like, I know. I'm sorry. Like, I make things harder for myself because I want to do it all and be it all. Like, we feel like as women, we have to, not to stereotype, but we have to wear it all on our shoulders, right? And I think that's so important. And I've heard so many stories of both women being supported in the workplace, but also not being supported in the workplace as mothers. And I think it's one thing to like advocate for yourself, but I also think it's another thing for organizations to create that environment. I was just listening to a podcast with Alex Morgan. She is one of the best soccer players in the country, or was, I should say. And she said she had to like literally write her own policies for US soccer for her maternity leave. Like, her daughter wasn't going to sit in the stands. Like, with a bunch of people heckling her. She's going to have her own suite. Like she's going to be in the locker room. She was like paving the way. And yes, there had been other women who had kids, but she was like, oh, well, once you have kids, like the stereotype is you're not going to deliver as better, or you're not going to be as committed or passionate or whatever it is, right? And that's not true at all. Like I have learned so many skills in my motherhood that I can apply to anywhere. And sometimes it makes you more driven because if you care about a certain mission, you want to commit to that even more because that's your kid's future, right? And
yeah,
I think we're at a standstill where like we can't discount mothers for choosing to have children. Like it is a beautiful experience, whether you choose to or not. And from your own experience and what you've observed in organizations, what on the flip side, like what are the most meaningful ways workplaces can support mothers, not just with policies, but with culture?
Yeah, no, I think culture is so important. And I will say I'm extremely grateful in my current role that we have really open communication, empathetic leadership who are thoughtful about there are many of us who have young children and we are picking our kids up from school. So our day has to end at a certain point. Maybe we're coming back if needed, right? In the evenings after our kids are in bed, or we're doing work early in the morning to flex that. But I think more and more organizations that are willing to be flexible in that way. And my daughter had an accident at preschool a few months ago, and she had to get stitches. And it was scary, right? It was a scary moment, but people stepped in, right? That was the culture. They said, you need to go, you need to handle this. We're going to get you off of meetings for today. And that, I think, speaks volumes in a way that I didn't feel like I needed to feel guilty, that I needed that time. We talk about it openly. I think that's so important to just continue to remind each other to have grace because the world is stressful enough, right? Beyond what we're doing in our day-to-day work lives, there's just so much happening in the world and politically and economically. Like, just give each other grace and be willing to have those conversations. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. I think that flexibility, and also like you don't have to be in the hospital like on your phone on a meeting, right? Like you can be fully present with your daughter. And sometimes those experiences are more traumatic for the mom than it is
100%.
for the kid. But you're allowed to be fully present in that moment, experience all the feels, and you don't have to worry about half-assing a meeting, right? And I think that does speak volumes to the culture. And I forgot to mention this earlier when you were talking about planning. I had Lacey Kopensky on the podcast. She is the person that runs Balance for Good, and they do in Canada and some in the US now step in and help with that maternity leave. And honestly, when I heard that Canada has 12 to 18 months, I was like, oh, wow. There's pluses and minuses for people who have gone through it. But for anyone listening, that is a good resource. Lacey is wonderful, and she has a lot of good advice on like how to prep for maternity leave and have some of those conversations. And then her job, her consultants, and I don't think she does as much consulting now, but help transition that person back into the workplace. So she's both working on the organization side and the fundraising side to make sure everyone, you know, is creating that culture and support. Imagine a fundraising partner that not only helps you raise more money, but also supports you in retaining your donors. A partner that helps you raise funds both online and on location, so you can grow your impact faster. That's DonorBox, a comprehensive suite of tools, services, and resources that give fundraisers just like you a custom solution to tackle your unique challenges, helping you achieve the growth and sustainability your organization needs, helping you help others. Visit donorbox.org to learn more.
I was thinking of Lacey exactly. I really appreciate what she does in helping to make plans for people to come back, because that's no small task.
Yeah, definitely. Going back to your certificate in inclusive philanthropy, how does inclusivity intersect with supporting mothers in the workplace? And especially, like we talked about, in a sector like fundraising that often demands long hours and emotional labor.
Yeah, I think that's completely aligned with inclusivity. When you have thoughtful policies and thoughtful culture around moms, and I would say primary parents and caregivers, right? We can't discount like that many of us are in the sandwich generation where we're caring for aging family members, for sick family members, right? Being a parent is not the only strain on our emotional and mental labor. There are many other factors. And so I think you open yourself up as an organization to many more talented employees. When you have these things in place, people will be loyal, right? They will find comfort in an organization where they know they can do good work and do it for the long time. I mean, you mentioned how often we have turnover in our field. And I think it is often because people encounter policies that are not inclusive, right? That are not accommodating for the day-to-day stressors of our lives. They go and seek that elsewhere or think about advancement too. I was informed that my trajectory had changed after becoming a parent. And that may not have been intended the way that it was communicated to me, but that it influenced decisions about my career. Because if anything, as you said, I think being a parent is sometimes a superpower. You learn to compartmentalize in different ways. You learn how to prioritize and balance a ton more. That isn't to discount folks who choose not to have children. You absolutely have other skills and talents and stressors too, but finding those pathways to support and encourage growth with your employees who have families, other caregiving responsibilities. I think that's critical. It demonstrates, a really healthy company to me.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And when you're talking about work-life balance, I've heard a lot of different iterations of that. Like balance is not the right word. And I was listening to a podcast the other day about how it's like the work-life juggle. And I struggle with this a lot where like, I think everything is a glass ball and I have to hold it all up in my head. And then like things start to drop and break and I get overwhelmed and stressed out. And like just talking about how there are like the glass balls that you have to hold close, like your family or your friends or like whatever is important to you. And then there's some of the plastic balls that you can drop. They'll be there. They won't break. And you can always pick them back up at a later date. And so I would love to ask you, as you think about like work-life balance, what are some of those glass balls that you hold tight to? And some of those plastic balls as becoming a mother, you've let go to the side. Not that they're not important. They just season and you can't do it all.
Yeah. I might shift that a little bit and talk more about perfectionism and urgency. This is something like I've really struggled with, right? Like I am that A+ student, and it has been really hard to let go of some of that A+ behavior, right? And to let go of some of that urgency. And I would challenge folks to think about urgency culture and perfectionism. I've been challenged with this as well, of like, how is that rooted in, I don't know how far you want to go with this, Haley, but how is it?
I think go deep. That's okay.
How is that rooted in white supremacy? This expectation that things have to be done now. And especially in roles like ours, which we're not saving lives necessarily, not directly, right? And the work that we do is relational. And it should be methodical, and it should be with long-term relationships in mind. And so I feel like that gives us more grace to say, today, I don't need to complete this thing. I can take my time with it. So divorcing yourself from that urgency of it has to get done. It has to get done right now. Communication, absolutely key, right? Like, how do we communicate? And I'm struggling with this right now, like very transparently. We're getting ready to go out of town, and there's a number of plastic balls, I feel are plastic balls, that have gotten dropped in preparation for that, right? But what's key is that I'm going to go spend some time with my family away from work, right? With my parents and my brother and my daughter and my husband, right? And I need that time. And we need to schedule that time for ourselves to make sure that happens. That is perhaps a glass ball that we don't want to drop. And we do this relational work with our donors, with our clients, with our partners. Let's take it into our personal lives too, right? Like it requires work and time and thoughtfulness. And so where can you say, this is good enough? This is good enough to be done. And this doesn't have to be done today. How can you reorganize yourself in that way?
Oh, that is so good. And I really appreciate that reframe. And it gives me a lot to think about in my own tendency for perfection and urgency. And I always remember when I've shared this story before, but when I lived in Malawi, I came in and I was like, you have to be 5 minutes early and on time is late and everything if we're meeting, you have to be there. But they had 3 different, they'd be like, if I'm coming now, maybe they'd come in 2 hours. If they were coming now, they weren't going to show up. They're coming now, they'll be there in 2 hours, right? And then now is we'll be there in 5 minutes. And for me, it was this is so disrespectful. You're not showing up. If I did that at home, I would get kicked out. But there, it was very relational. And it was we respect you enough that we will show up. And it's within our own time. And it was all about the relationship and not necessarily the sense of urgency. And stuff still got done. It got done effectively. But it wasn't on my timeline where it was I have to get it done now. And then we got to think the 10 steps ahead. And so I really had to think about how my own biases and culture played into that of adapting to a different culture and understanding it doesn't all have to be perfect and urgent and on a certain timeline.
Mm-hmm. And think about that. What you just said is that's rooted in trust. If we're doing the job of building trust, that people know we're going to show up. And I think about it in terms of how we operate in our teams at work, right? Trust your folks to do their job. Trust your folks to be the experts that you've hired them to be. Because I think a lot of our urgency and our perfectionism comes from this desire to check and double check and make sure everything is absolutely perfect. And I don't know, I guess in my experience, there's room for forgiveness in there. Because you can make mistakes, right? That does happen. But there's nothing we can't recover from.
Yeah. And I just had someone on my podcast a few weeks ago talk about how he started a nonprofit and failed and then had to close it down. And I think sometimes those mistakes and sometimes those failures are learning opportunities and they're points for growth, right? You can make a mistake and it's not necessarily the end all be all. It's what played a part in that mistake and how can we work together to make it better or pivot or whatever word you want to use. And I think that is an important to have that grace and that understanding that not everything is going to be in order and that's okay. And I'm saying that to myself as an affirmation right now. I'm as much as I'm telling it to you, I'm telling it to myself.
Well, so I had a voice teacher in college and this has really just rooted in my brain. And I, because of my perfectionism, was always so afraid, even in the rehearsal room, right? It's just me and my professor. And I would just struggle to get out of my own head to try a song, right? To try a line. And she'd be like, make the noise, because once it is out there, then we know what we're working with and we can refine it. And truly, I feel that has been true in everything that I have done. You are going to make a mistake. You're going to squeak. Your voice is going to break, right? You're not going to hit the note right. You're going to say, oh, I could support that with my breath a little bit better. But you don't know until you put it out there. And so I think about what you just described, Gina, your colleague who started a nonprofit and failed. They didn't know. They didn't know that it was going to fail. And there are things to learn from that. And these are things I think we can take from tech founders too, right? A fail forward, try it, get reactions, right? And there are going to be instances where you're adjusting your urgency and your perfectionism, and you're going to get negative feedback, and you're going to say, okay, with this person, with this job, this thing, this does have to come up in my priority list and make sure that I get this more perfect the next time. But there's really nothing you can't recover from, in my opinion.
That's so good. If you could give one piece of advice to nonprofit leaders who want to better support working mothers on their teams, what would it be? What would be your lasting advice?
I think it's the flexibility. I think the flexibility and trust, right? These folks want to do a good job. Like 99% of the people I encounter say, I want to do the best job that I can. And so when you have that grace and that space to say, I'm going to make it happen, but I also need to take care of my family in this moment. I need to go pick them up from school. I want to be there when they've got a field trip. I'll pick this up later tonight or tomorrow morning. It will get done. Like having that trust and that grace, you're going to have folks who are much more willing to lean in when they can.
Yeah, creating that trust and that connection allows us to collaborate and innovate and communicate and access those skills that we need to be able to do our job when we don't have them, and it inhibits us from accessing those skills. And so I think it's easier said than done, obviously, but I think having that trust is just the foundation, like you said, foundational to being able to support, well, really anyone in the workplace, but mothers as well. If people want to find you and the work that you do, I know you are doing a lot of speaking this fall and will be on the Lead with Heart Summit next year. So tell me where people can find you.
Yeah, well, please do follow me on LinkedIn. Reach out, connect with me. I'm always interested in meeting and talking with folks in the sector and outside of our sector. But I'll be at AHP International Conference in Aurora in October. I'll be at AFP Lead with Jackalato. I'm going to be on a couple of webinars coming up too. So follow me, reach out, connect with me. I'm more than happy to chat with anyone.
Well, thank you so much, Bree, for being on this podcast. I always enjoy our conversation, and you are just such a gift to me.
Oh, likewise. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Hey, before you go, want to watch? Yes, watch the best moments from the Lead with Heart episodes? We're sharing the most powerful highlights and takeaways over on our brand new YouTube channel. Yes, we are on YouTube. Just search for The Savvy Fundraiser on YouTube and hit subscribe so you never miss a moment of insight and inspiration. The link is in the show notes as well. Thanks for listening, and as always, keep leading with heart.